Hi, Julie.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Oh, hanging in there.
Hey,
I have a
how goes it?
question that's not related to the resume, but how do we join the alumni association? Sorry, Laura.
Did you happen to actually just sent an email about this? Did you see anything come through?
Yes,
Okay.
but you have to join the association first, I think.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, hence your question. I understand. Good question.
I think that you get an email from USC in general that says set up your alumni Trojan profile here with a link.
Okay, I'll look for that.
Yeah, possibly. I think that's what I recall somebody getting, but I could be wrong. You can always there's probably also a website.
There's an email I need to write to probably. I could ask them.
I think it's right. Like you want to join, register. Welcome 2020 graduates. That thing. Stay connected. Right. The Trojan Network or something. Here.
Something, yeah.
I'm going to put something in the chat here, and hopefully, I'll just put it in for everyone. And hopefully that'll maybe give you some direction on how to get there.
Well, I may be the only one with that question too.
Hi. Yeah, I think it's the Trojan Network, and then you sign it up and you can see benefits and whatnot. You should get a card, maybe. Okay. There, Ken, I put the link in the chat for the alumni thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do it. I'm going to. Start sharing. Can you see that?
Yes.
And it's in the right presentation view.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You can't see my next slide or anything.
Hi, Julie. Hi, Trisha.
Hi.
Nikki. Good to see you.
Hi.
Yeah, we have some grads and grad alumni here. This is great. Hi, Ling. All right. Well, I've got 5:01. So to respect the time of everyone here, and since we are recording, I'll go ahead and get started, and then hopefully folks will. If I can ask others who are set up as co-hosts to just kind of keep an eye on the waiting room, please, and admit folks as you see enter. Okay, so thanks very much for joining us for this resume workshop. We've done this a few times now, and it seems to be pretty useful. And so thank you very much. As a number of you have come through our graduate programs, some of the examples that we're going to use may look familiar to you, as some of them are drawn from the resume assignment that you completed. But for those of you who haven't gone through those programs or who are just coming to this fresh, hopefully we'll be able to provide some useful information for you in terms of best practices for putting together a useful resume that can help get your foot in the door, particularly in a time right now where it can be hard to do that. So just to give you kind of a sense of what type of presentation this is, we've got the agenda here. We're going to keep it pretty high level, and some of this is going to be somewhat stylistic, obviously. Folks have different individualized resume preferences and perhaps different ideas about where things might be placed. Given the fact that we have seen a large number of resumes, both Dr. Loyola and Susan and myself, particularly as we see the applications for students coming through the graduate programs, and we see all of your resumes as you do the resume assignments in the graduate programs each semester. We've kind of developed this presentation to address some of the things that I think we see pretty frequently, and hopefully give you some ideas on how to avoid some of those pitfalls and really make use of some of the best ways that you can put together a meaningful resume. So we're going to kind of, like a good resume, we're going to start at the kind of broad view and then work our way down to some more specifics. But just to give you a sense again of what we're looking at here in this presentation, this is our agenda. So there will be time for questions and answers at the end, but I would also invite you to put questions in the chat. And again, if I can ask some of my co-hosts to just kind of keep an eye on that, particularly Susan, I'm looking at you. And if you feel comfortable answering questions as we go, that can help us as well, in the event that we get a lot of questions that we aren't able to get to by the end of the presentation. So, and I should give credit where credit is due. Much of this presentation is developed through one that Susan gave during the URISA conference. So for those of you who have recently finished or are still currently in a graduate program, there is a professional organization called URISA that you likely have heard about, that has a really strong young professional component to it. And so it's a really good way to get involved and meet others who are in the field. And so they do a conference every year, and obviously this year it was virtual, but in the past when we've gone, Susan has given a type of presentation that is similar to this. And so I have, with much gratitude, lifted some of the slides from Susan's presentation. So, and I may ask Susan to jump in from time to time here. So, okay, let's kick this off. So what makes a good resume? And I think just from a very basic standpoint, we all probably know what a resume is, but the resume is really an opportunity for you to communicate to an employer why you are a good fit for their position. The reason that there is a picture of a closet on this slide is because, and I'm gonna hopefully do this metaphor justice the way that Susan has done in the past, but the reason that there's a picture of a closet is because a resume can be similar to an outfit, right? So one of the main kind of ideas that we like to really try to impart to students, and part of the reason why the resume assignment is done every semester and not just once at the beginning or once at the end, is because your resume should be continuously developed, and it should be tailored to fit a position for which you are applying. And no two positions are exactly the same, so no two resumes should be exactly the same. So to carry on the metaphor of the clothes in the closet, you wouldn't wear the same clothes to a job interview that you would wear to a day at the beach, that you would wear on a first date, that you would wear just to clean up the house. So I mean, I guess maybe you could wear the same thing, but it would be out of place, and it would be unusual. So the goal here is to tailor and customize the information you're including on the resume that shows why it's a good fit, why it's the right fit for that position. You've got swim trunks when you're at the beach. You've got a business suit when you're in an interview. It's the right fit for that particular setting. Some additional kind of points here, again, to kind of hammer home the idea that it really needs to be customized to a specific job. So for those of you who are in a position where you're looking for jobs right now, you're probably looking at lots of different job descriptions and sending multiple resumes out. Each of those should be specific, and not just specific, but should really mirror some of the keywords that you're finding in those job descriptions for which you're applying. So the goal here is that this helps the person who is putting their eyes on your resume to understand why you are the best fit to do exactly what they need you to do. It's great that you have the experience that you have, but really the goal here is to set up the possibility for an interview so that you can explain to them why you can fill their need. And the resume is the first step in doing that. Okay, so a couple kind of building block components of the resume in terms of what the standard, your standard resume should look like. And again, some of these may vary depending on the situation, depending on personal preference within certain parameters and to a certain extent. But these are going to be some kind of general guidelines that everybody, for the most part, should follow. Obviously, it really needs to have your name and contact information. As much contact information as you are comfortable in giving is ideal, but at the very least, a phone number and an email are really necessary. Some international students sometimes are used to resumes that include a photo. When applying to jobs in the States, that's not necessary. So just kind of keep that in mind. Again, it kind of depends on where you're looking, but including a photo, your headshot on your resume is not necessarily a requirement. But it should include kind of 3 general basic components. As you can see on the slide there, your education, your work or research experience, and then the relevant skills and any additional information that you'd like to share with the employer. Again, being specific to what they are looking for. At this stage of our academic careers, the education component should really just be focusing on post-secondary, so you don't need to list your high school, but any and all relevant education, post-secondary education should definitely be on there, including things like graduate certificates or associate degrees or any kind of academic credential that you've earned from an accredited university or institution is ideal to have on there. We're going to go into some more specifics of kind of each of these components a little bit, but just in a general sense, you want to at least have those 3 sections. And then it's important to be mindful of kind of the aesthetic of your resume. I've seen, and maybe you have 2 resumes that are printed on, really kind of radical colors of paper, or their format, they've done different things with the format or with the font. In the right setting, that can be okay, but typically for students coming through our programs and in a general sense looking for the types of jobs that most of our graduates are looking for, it's not advisable. Let me put it that way. And so again, we have some additional slides towards the end of this presentation that focus a little bit more on aesthetic, but again, from a general perspective, off or slightly off white paper is really preferable. Ideally with 1 page. This differs a little bit from a academic or research CV, where you're really listing things like publications and conference presentations, and if you are in the field of academia and you're a PI on a research project, or you're a advisor for a thesis, obviously a curriculum vitae is going to be a little bit longer, but again, for most of the students coming through our programs, undergraduate and graduate, trying to keep it succinct is important, because the interview is really the opportunity that you'll have to expand on what you've done so far. Okay, so again, just some kind of general pointers here. This is actually my education history, not to date myself. I'm realizing now that putting the years that I earned my degrees on here gives folks a sense of how old I am, but that's okay. So generally speaking, putting the most recent education, including current education, at the top is ideal. And that's a pretty good rule of thumb just throughout the course of the resume, is that the most recent stuff should usually be at the beginning, unless there's some kind of other format that you're shooting for. But generally speaking, you want to have the most recent things at the beginning or at the top of the list there. And if you're in a program right now, you can, as you've done on the resume assignment list, the expected graduation date as when at the top. So it's important to include things that are still in process as well. The other tip is just to avoid abbreviations. we know USC, but not when, if you go to the other side of the country and you say USC, people may think University of South Carolina. We've run into that. So it's important to just spell everything out, including the names of the degrees as well. Okay, so again, kind of continuing this idea, moving into work and research. It's important to have, again, as much information packed into as succinct a space as possible. You don't want to list every single thing you've done for every single position all the way back to the beginning of time. And so from a stylistic standpoint, typically what we've tried to do is include, have students include, definitely include the name of the employer, and definitely include the title of your position. And then if it's an employer that is not necessarily very well known, it can be super useful to include a very, very short kind of explanation of what type of work that organization does. We've actually just gone through a program review for the Masters of Science in GIST program, and part of that review process was supplying placement information for graduates of the program over the last few years. And so I've got this like at the front of my mind right now that, there are students who have, come out of our program and they work for General Electric or Verizon. I think in those cases, you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time explaining what those organizations do. But if you are working with a startup or something that's not necessarily a household name, it can be useful to include a short, like one sentence type explanation of what the organization does and the type of work that in which they engage. Something here I think that really kind of gets into the meat of what's important about building a resume is avoiding listing tasks. And this is something that I still, I think to this day, struggle with sometimes, because you want to, I think it's innate that you want to communicate all the great things that you've done, but it's really, really important that you are specific and use quantifiable information whenever you can. So what does that look like? See, Susan, I actually gave you credit on, on these slides here. So, and perhaps Susan, I don't know. I think, you've done a really good job, not to put you on the spot, but can you tell us a little bit about like what it means to use skill-based impact as opposed to listing tasks? Can I ask you to do that?
Sure. Okay. Hi, everybody. The slide gives an example of what I'll call an activity-based statement, meaning it's something that you did. It was an activity. You served as a GIS intern. In contrast, you might have included a statement that said you did a particular task, you filled a particular role, such as you built a database. What employers, which is much more persuasive to employers, is that you have a skills-based impact statement that combines the activity that you did. In this example, you created a web app, and then how you did it, which was through ArcGIS, so it gives them an indication of your proficiency with applications and platforms. And then you give a result. And I think, Ken, if you go to the next slide, there's a formula for this. Okay, so this would be your formula. You take the task that you did and the skill that you used to complete the task, and then try to come up with some kind of way to give an indication of the result or the impact. And if you are able to quantify it, that's good. If you're able, if it was to show that something was innovative and unique and it never been done before, then that would be something that you could do too. Any questions on that? So this would be a good formula. Okay.
Right. Perfect.
Next.
So this I think is kind of an example of the type of thing that we see pretty regularly on some of the resumes that we review. You know, this was an example of you know, somebody who has typically undergrads who have work study financial aid, and so they come and do day-to-day administrative tasks in our office. And so this would be an example perhaps of what not to do. In
Well,
that
Ken, these would be those task-oriented statements, and it just ends there.
Right, exactly. Where we can see that, as Susan said, giving specific examples using quantifiable markers, it really makes a much more impactful impression for somebody looking at the application, as opposed to just, you know, I use the student database. Okay, well, what did you do to have an impact when you use the student database? How did you use it? What did that lead to? Right. So these are all really important things to consider and to be really kind of self-reflective. And so this is part of why this process takes some time, because it's not just a matter of just checking boxes of I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, but really stopping to think about, you know, why you did it and what the impact it had was, so that you can communicate that effectively in the resume. So I think, you know, we've seen, we've all seen, you know, the kind of the standard resume that's got, I did this job, and then I did this job, and then I did this job. And that's certainly, you know, useful, especially when you build it the way that Susan was just telling us about. It's also really important to include space, though, at the bottom that gives a bigger picture sense of what you have accomplished in your time, either in an academic program or doing research, or in the work environment. And so this is kind of the opportunity for you to put some icing on the cake in terms of what sets you apart from others, not just in the way that you did a previous job, or the way that you contributed to previous research or previous efforts, but perhaps highlighting some of the things that you did along the way that help kind of top that up. And so these can include anything like you see on the slide here, from awards and honors, professional organizational membership is really important and a really easy thing to do and use to help kind of boost your resume. Obviously, it helps with things like networking and professional development, but it also looks really great and helps kind of communicate the idea that you're staying abreast of you know, new developments in the field and are an active part of a particular domain. Conference presentations are another really great thing to include here. And for those of you that have had the opportunity to come to the Los Angeles Geospatial Summit that we host every year, this is you know, opportunities like that are a really great way to kind of develop and get the opportunity to do some of these resume building things, like poster presentations or white paper presentations or panel discussions. Even things like moderating panels can be useful kind of building blocks for your additional information and relevant skills. The other important piece here, particularly for those, you know, we're in a technical field in GIST, so software and hardware fluencies are really, really important. One of the things that we saw pretty frequently with the resume assignments that we see from students coming through our graduate programs is sometimes students conflate the language with, you know, computer coding language with spoken language. And so it's important to keep those, both are useful and both are relevant, but it's important to keep them kind of separate and just to break them out. And, you know, certain things like, you know, at this point, I think it's a pretty safe assumption that most folks who are putting together a resume know how to use Microsoft Word, or that we're all hopefully fluent in English. You know, so these are, it's important to be kind of particular about what is being included in this additional information and relevant skills part, and make sure it is in fact relevant. So just kind of something to think about when pulling out your bag of tricks here. So this slide kind of speaks to the aesthetic that I was talking about early on in the presentation, and gives you know, 2 examples of various layouts that we've seen in different resume presentations. The one on the left hopefully looks familiar to everybody. Maybe, I don't know, maybe scary to some folks, depending on how many times you've had to redo it. But you can see that it's a really kind of balanced in terms of the way it looks on the page, in terms of the left and right justification, the use of white space in the margins. It looks complete, but it looks clean, and it looks balanced. Whereas the resume on the right is, you know, centered, justified, or I don't even know if it's called justified, maybe just centered. It's much harder on the eyes. And although, you know, you might look at it and say, well, it gives it a, you know, a stylistic flair that sets it apart from other resumes. When an employer is looking through a pile or a stack of resumes, it can be difficult to go from looking at you know, however many resumes that look like the ones on the left to all of a sudden looking at one that looks like one on the right, or has some other kind of formatting to it. And it's a little bit jarring, and it can be difficult to kind of discern where the information is that you're looking for, particularly if the employer is looking for some very specific thing. You know, they may be leafing through resumes just to look to see everybody who has a master's degree, for example. So if you're looking kind of, you know, and generally in the same place on all the resumes, not that everybody's going to have exactly the same, but in a general sense, looking in the same place, and then all of a sudden you come to one that has this totally off the wall formatting to it, then it can make it difficult for the person reviewing it to find that information quickly. It's important, you know, the aesthetic, I think, is something that sometimes gets overlooked because we concentrate so much on the content of the resume, and making sure that we don't have typos, and making sure that we're, you know, communicating effectively how great we are. That you know, it's important not to overlook this piece that maybe not everybody thinks about. So it's an important piece. Okay, and so again, you know, kind of in all of the years that we've done our resumes, we've seen the same things many times, and so as a result of that, we've put together kind of a style tips and tricks component that just address some of the things that we tend to see pretty frequently. And so with that in mind, there are a couple points here that we really want to highlight. The first being consistency. And so I don't know, and maybe Susan, you have an opinion on this. I don't know that there's necessarily a right or wrong in terms of using first person. You know, I was responsible for doing this versus just kind of, you know, as long as you're using the impact statements listing the impact that you had on the organization. But it's important not to switch back and forth or flip-flop back and forth. Again, when an employer is reading the resume and going through lots and lots of them, you want to make it as easy on them as possible to get as much information as they can from your resume. And so, you know, little things like changing the voice of the resume, in one portion talking about, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, and then the next portion talking about works with, responsible for, built this. It just is a little bit, again, kind of jarring. So, so it's important to, once you pick the voice that you want to have for your resume, to maintain that all the way through. And that goes for kind of grammatical structure and the way each section is laid out. you know, for the resume kind of template that we use in the assignment, you know, there are opportunities to list each of your various positions and different employers that you've had, but you want to make sure the structure of those is the same as you go from one to the next to the next. So again, it may seem trivial, but you know, listing the title of your position first, and then the name of the employer second for one job history entry, and then switching them for the next one can be a little bit confusing and just kind of slow the reader down. So you know, consistency in the voice, consistency in the structure of the resume are really, really important. And perhaps it goes without saying at this point, but grammar and spelling are really, really important. You know, I think I've heard Dr. Wilson a couple times, that, you know, resumes that have typos on them, the moment he sees the typo, it's out of the pile. The person's crossed off the list. So you know, it's just the kind of thing that in this situation really shouldn't happen. So whether that means you do the resume and then you walk away from it for a period of time and you come back, certainly want to get other eyes on it and have additional folks kind of proofread it for you. These are really, really important steps that kind of can't be overlooked. Sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, well, the issue about first person or first person voice versus third person is that sometimes we see the author of the resume is referring to him, her, they, themselves as if they were somebody else. And so I think the concept that you are talking about yourself in the first person makes the most sense. And the elimination of the word I is just to save valuable resume real estate.
Right.
That you just, to have a repeated I was responsible or use I throughout your resume is taking away from the space where you can talk about something else.
Right.
So that's where that theory has come from.
Perfect.
And I wanted to chime in too for the consistency portion of it too. I think keeping the tense consistent as well. So if you're talking about past tense for a previous position, just making sure that every line is in past tense. And same thing if for your current position, just making sure that every line is in the present tense.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Absolutely. Yeah, really, really good point. And then this is actually something that I didn't know until I started working with Susan, is em dashes and hyphens are not the same thing, and they're not interchangeable. I think Dr. Loyola put in the chat here the definition of em dashes. And so, Susan, can I ask for your expertise on this one?
Okay, so a hyphen is what I'll call the shortest possible dash. And you use that when you have hyphenated words. You use that when you have a break in a line and a word is continuing on to the next line. We use em dashes, which is if you're in Microsoft Word and you do a double dash and then you hit return, and it makes something that is elongated hyphen. And that's what we use to set off text, or it's like to indicate a parenthetical. We also use it stylistically, that instead of using lots of commas, we might in our resume template for the SSI resume book, we use it because it's cleaner, it's less cluttered than having a series of commas. So you just could be aware that if in the resume style guide, in the resume book style guide, we're indicating examples of where to use an em dash, and it is not the same as a hyphen.
Thank you. and then I don't think we included it on here, but oops, just to go back to this idea of grammar and spelling consistency, periods are another thing that I know that we've tried to standardize across our resumes. Is if you use a period at the end of a bullet point, for example, when which you're talking about a previous position, it's important to then continue the use of that throughout. And so, yeah, just, again, little things to consider that really help kind of polish your resume and make it that much more readable for the, hopefully the person, not the computer software, but hopefully the person that's reviewing your application when you get to that point. So continuing some of these style tips and tricks, the additional information section that I was discussing earlier that had on the slide with the picture of the bag of tricks, it's really important to, as I said, use that wisely, but to be selective about the information that's in there. And one of the other things that we see relatively frequently with and have seen for some time with the resumes that come through our program is that students leave off the things that they're working on in class now, or that they had been previously working on in the semester prior to that. So understanding that you may not necessarily be an expert in a particular software platform or coding language after one semester, your experience in working with that in that class is important to include. So you want to be kind of conscious as you're building your resume, and particularly for those of you who are in academic programs or will be in academic programs, of including the things that you're doing now, and making sure that you include that.
So I think the most important thing, and we didn't really dwell on this in the presentation thus far, but when Ken was showing the slide at the beginning about the wardrobe, the idea is that you're selecting what's on your resume to fit the job description of the position that you are applying for, and that you are tailoring your resume. You're not going to use the same resume. Well, let us recommend that you not use the same resume to apply for positions without changing your resume tailored to that job description. So if you think you have one resume and you're spinning that out, no matter what the job application is, and you're not getting any results, then there's a reason for that, right? So the job descriptions are your basis for deciding what you emphasize and the words that you want to have on your resume. And so what Ken was just talking about in terms of examples from either classwork or professional work, you're going to think about what those examples are depending on what the job description is calling for. In many companies, and not just in companies that are large, but certainly in corporations and entities of some scale, the first pass, when you mostly you're submitting your resume for a position in an online platform. You're uploading your resume, and what you need to know is that in most cases, no human eyes are actually looking at your resume at that stage. That they're employing machine learning and other techniques that say, okay, for this job description, they're looking for certain words, and then those are the words that match up with that job description. And human eyes are not actually reviewing your resume. So it's so important that you include on your resume, and somebody who's put in for that position has told their HR or talent acquisition folks, here's the kind of keywords that we're looking for. And so the computer is scanning your resume for the HR people. The HR people then might say, okay, based on what we know the GIS team is looking for, then they'll make a cut, and maybe after 2 or 3 cuts, will the people who are actually doing the interviewing, the people who are actually got the open position, will look at a relatively small set of resumes that have already been vetted. Okay, so your goal is to get into the position where somebody with knowledge about GIS can appreciate your resume and what you've done, but you have to jump through those other 2 hoops. So if you're not submitting a resume with the words that match the job description, you're not going to get in front of the people that are actually making the hiring decision. Okay, so all of these other points are important once somebody with a live set of eyes is looking at that in terms of assessing, the sense of the professional that you are. But the key thing, and this goes to what Ken was describing in terms of how you think about your experience and how you're presenting yourself, this is how you need to decide from what classes were the most relevant, what projects from those classes might be the most useful to you in showing your experience. And so I'll let, okay, is there any value in separating hardware and software? Well, it depends on how lengthy your list is. So the question is there any value in separating hardware and software in terms of how experienced we are in them?
Susan, I was going to say that it really depends on the position that, in this case, Lindsay was the one who asked the question. It depends on the position that she's applying for and how much experience she has. So like if she's applying for a tech company or a company that software or hardware matters to, then yes, you would want to split it into 2 different fields. So for us, we split into 2 different fields in our resume book because the type of work or courses that we do, it matters. So it really depends on that, as well as if you have very little experience with either or, then you might want to consolidate into 1 field.
So what I consistently hear from employers is that they're looking for indications that someone is able to hit the ground running. And they're looking for individuals that can pick things up quickly and throw themselves at new situations and have the ability to figure things out. So they don't necessarily expect that they might have a long laundry list of things that they're looking for and experience has, blank number of years. But what they're really looking for are indications of how quick on the uptake you are, that things that are going to be important to their work, that if you haven't had experience in it, how comfortable are they that you can quickly get up to speed on that? And we see this in our student researchers all the time, that we might have some students that have taken a lot of courses in a particular topic, but they haven't actually developed the facility in how to apply that awareness, that content, that knowledge that they had in class into a real life project. They might have been decent students, but they haven't developed the skill set of being able to take that and figure out, okay, I have some way to get started on here, and now I'm gonna go investigate how do I do this to apply this to my work. Other students might not have any backgrounds in something, but they've learned how to learn. And they're able to draw upon that ability that they know how to learn and come up to speed quickly. And that's what I hear employers think is golden. So you shouldn't necessarily be daunted that you have, in all cases of software, a vast amount of experience, or to say that you're proficient or whatever. The goal is to show that, and this is part of why we do use Esri and other platforms in our programs. It's the analogy of I'll use from sailing, that if you can sail a small boat, you can sail a big boat. But if you sail a big boat, that doesn't mean you could. There's higher skills that's involved in sailing the small boat. So with whether it's the ArcGIS ecosystem or others, if you show that you're brave and you're agile, and you've tackled learning different kinds of programs, then that would be a useful sign to a potential employer that that you're comfortable learning new languages, you're comfortable working working at the edges of customized applications or whatnot.
Perfect. Good. Thank you. I think that's all very helpful and important points. And so just to kind of finish up the last point on this slide here, I think we've mentioned being concise a couple times, but the idea of just being factual. We've talked about being making impact statements, but making sure that you're not editorializing. I was the best the best GIS analyst in this department. You're using, maybe you were, and that's great. And if you can use a quantifiable impact statement to illustrate that, then that's great. But it's important in the sake of being concise and to the point, to use facts and not to add kind of your opinion to the resume. And then, okay. So there are additional resources outside of those of us in this webinar, including the USC Career Center. Graduates of the USC programs can access the Career Center for, I believe it's a couple years, I believe. I'll double check that. But you do have access even after you finish up your time at USC to the Career Center. On a limited basis. Whenever we're able to go back to campus, they're located in the Student Union building. But for those of you that are remote, and for the time being, they're doing all of their normal services. They're just doing it virtually. So they host a series of resume workshops for which you can find the calendar on their website. And their website is there at careers.usc.edu. You can also use that site to schedule one-on-one appointments, including some additional kind of advising. One of the things that we like to do in this presentation that we've done in the past when we're able to be together in the Spatial Sciences Institute conference room is to have students bring their resume, and we can kind of work with you on a one-on-one basis. The Career Center is available to do that just about any time. So if you're interested in having somebody look at your specific resume, then you can of course set up time to chat with Susan or Daron or myself. But you can also, and I would encourage you to take advantage of the folks in the Career Center as they have advisors there designed to specifically help you. And then they maintain a blog series as well, which you can find linked there.
Ken, I was going to add, so we have our own resume book, but the Career Center has their own resume book as well. And we send out some email announcements on I believe it might have passed already for their upcoming resume book. But you guys should keep a lookout on that too, and make sure that you're submitting, even if you submit for our resume book, make sure that you submit for the Career Center's resume book as well. It never hurts to have your resume out there. Yeah,
super good point, Darren. Thank you. I see Dr. Loyola in the room as well. Your faculty are also good resources to look at your resume, particularly if you have questions about some of the technical aspects of what you've done and what you'd like to include on your resume. You know, our faculty are obviously experts in the field, and so they can give you some specific advice on how to craft some of the language around the technical accomplishments and you know, body of knowledge that you might have. So certainly lean on them as much as possible too. Yeah, Laura says to just email them.
Yeah, I was gonna say just email us. I already pulled my hair back for the day. We have the virtual office hours, which usually means I'm sitting on Zoom with my Zoom on and nobody here. So you know, email us, find out what our office hours are, and stop on by.
I'll come to your next office hours, Dr. Loyola, and hang out with you.
All right.
And then, yeah, so, and then Dayron just entered in the chat also the link to the Career Center's resume book. So you can find more information there as well on the efforts that they take. Participating in a resume book is really, I think, a really good way to get your name out there. This, you know, the Spatial Sciences resume book is something that Susan introduced a number of years ago, and over time we've been able to build through our outreach and development and relationship building efforts, have built a pretty wide audience, including folks who will ask us for it each year. So you know, making sure that you have a strong resume and then getting it into things like the Spatial Sciences resume book and the USC Career Center's resume book is really a good way to cast your net widely, as opposed to just applying, in addition to applying to individual positions as well. So we certainly encourage that. I think the next slide is just the questions. So we've got, I'm going to leave this link up, so this slide up, so you can see the links there, but we've got another 10 minutes or so. And so if there are any additional questions that you'd like to enter into the chat, or you can unmute yourself. I think we have a manageable group here that, you know, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, if you so feel, then you can do that as well. But we'll leave the last few minutes here for questions. So fire away if you've got any.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I've heard that using italics will get your resume like skipped in those automated scanner things, the ATC, I forget what that.
So usually you want to use a very easy to read font. My recommendation would be a sans serif font. Sans serif fonts such as Calibri or Arial, or you know, what it is, these are the kind of fonts that are in the PowerPoint right now. They also take up less space than serif fonts. Times Roman would be an example of a serif font. So generally, you do not want to mix up fonts, and generally you don't want to. So I don't know about the answer about italics, but I think you just want to keep it clean and simple and straightforward, and not be mixing a lot of styles.
Lauren, I think you had the next question.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, I haven't been to a resume workshop for a while, so maybe this is common knowledge that I've just never been given. But when you're like part of an organization or a club for a while, and you've held multiple positions at different times, what do you think the best way to denote that is? Because I've usually I feel like it looks cluttered to have, let's say I'm an undergrad, so I've been in a student government organization since fall 2017 when I was a freshman, and I'm still in it now, but I've held various positions. Should I
Okay.
have fall 2017? Okay.
So this is a really important question. I'm glad you asked it. Okay. So the concept of your resume from when you were a high school student and applying for college. And in college is a different philosophy than how you're going to use your resume to apply for a job. Okay, so the most important thing that you need to use your resume, so this is a new mindset for what your resume represents. Okay, so when you're applying for a job, which is different than applying for an award or applying for a scholarship, right? So, we make nominations for student awards. And the kind of resume that you're gonna, if we think we can nominate you successfully for an award, the kind of resume for that is going to be different than the kind of resume that you might have ginned up to apply for a position. Okay, so right now let's just talk about a resume that you're using to apply for a position. The most important thing that you need to have on your resume are the qualifications for that job description. They do not care, and I don't mean this cruelly, but they do not care about your student government or community service or campus activities. They really don't. Okay, now, where I think, I'm not saying don't leave it off, because at the point that you get down to where we hope you get to, which is live eyes are looking at your resume and are trying to decide the priority of how many they interview and whether they interview more or not, then it's important that they have a sense of the kind of person that you are and what makes you tick, right? So the most important thing you want to have on your resume and give it the most territory are your qualifications for the position. If your student activities help bolster that, then please add them, right? But if it's to show that you're an engaged social citizen and you do good works and that sort of thing, keep it brief, and you can summarize, and do not put, this is not your resume for high school to get into college, right? So you may decide that the most important thing is to show that from this time to this time, you've been involved, so there's longevity in your involvement, and that you served as the president or you served as the director of something, right? So you just have to use your judgment in what the purpose of the resume is for, okay? Now, so for instance, when we nominate students for graduation honors that are presented by Student Affairs, they are exactly looking for what kind of citizen were you? What kind of impact did you have in the community? What kind of impact did you have in university life? That resume is going to be quite full, and you're gonna want to tell us that kind of detail, and you're going to tell them that kind of detail. But you just have to know what the purpose of your resume is for. Okay, so if it's for a job, you're gonna use more examples from your coursework or from research or from an internship or a part-time job. And if you did something as a volunteer and it's relevant to, you did coding, you did a mapathon, humanitarian mapathon, or whatever it was. But if that helps bolster showing your experience for that job, then show that. This is a very good question. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's hard to, because I agree. It's just a hard mindset to switch from like showing everything about yourself to I'm making that transition now. So thank you.
It is definitely in transition, but it's not an on-off switch.
Yeah, no, it's just hard when like being involved in many things and then having to kind of leave them off or figure out how to fit them at the bottom is difficult.
Well, pick the ones that are the most meaningful to you. So let's just imagine that you get that interview, right? And what I like to, we were just interviewing for an administrative temp. And I think it kind of drives John Wilson crazy because we have our assigned questions, and depending on what I'm hearing from the individual, I might go a little off script and ask So what do you like to do outside of work, right? And sometimes the answers are our opportunity to really get a feel for the kind of individual. And so I think it's important to include something that's personal and important to you, in the hopes that in the course of the interview, they say, Lauren has really got all of these job skills nailed. Then the most important thing is, do I see myself and our team working with her, right? And so is she the kind of person that I think we're going to click, that there will be work chemistry, right? And so sometimes those things that are important to you, they'll ask you, well, that's really interesting that you are involved in, fill in the blank. Tell us a little bit about that. And that's the kind of question that then you're gonna love, and you can show what kind of commitment you have and what's important to you, right? So you might use that as, if they're gonna ask me about something right now, what's the most important thing that I would love to tell them about?
And this is a lifelong thing. Every resume, every new job, every position even. As a faculty member, I go through this every time. Susan can attest to that. But we have one more question in there from Ling Lee. For the impact of your work, if you can't measure the impact qualitatively, are there other ways to describe the impact without sounding vague?
Well, the impact is ideal. If you don't have a way to describe the impact, then you don't have a way to describe the impact, right?
Sort of like that resulting in something. That's that impact.
Well, so like if it helped, if it was something, if you were able to do something, so answering the question, what did you do that they couldn't have done before, right? And so that would be an impact. Say because I created this, or because I did this, it allowed the organization to do blah, 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 that they couldn't do before. That is the impact. It's not necessarily quantitative, but it's definitely an impact.
Got it. Thank you, Susan.
And actually, a lot of
Lauren's,
sorry,
yeah.
Sorry, going back to Lauren's question about holding different positions. So if you've had multiple positions throughout the course of your time at a company, are you just picking the one, the most recent one that you left with?
No.
Yeah, okay, so that's different. Okay, so in your employment history, you do want to be complete. So for instance,
okay, you would list
so she was talking about community service and,
and student organization type.
Right.
Where she held different like officer positions for a student organization, different job position, different titles within a company are different job positions.
Yeah, and you definitely want to show that, and you want to show the time frame that you held that title, because that shows that you were promoted, that there was a progression in your professional trajectory. So for instance, I've been at USC for decades, and so I've had one employer, which is the University of Southern California, but I've had multiple jobs and timeframes in which I've held different titles and different kinds of responsibility. So I would break all those out. So employment history, yes.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so just to be respectful, mindful of everybody's time, I think we're at 6 o'clock. So right on the button here. So I'd like to invite you to feel free to email us if you have any additional questions, or if we can offer any additional insight or guidance. Hopefully, at least some of the information, if not all of it, was useful and relevant to you. We're happy to take a look at resumes, to the best of our ability, if you can send those to us. But feel free to shoot us questions as they arise, and we'll be happy to work with you as you work through this really, really important part of your professional development. So we want to be able to excuse everyone that would like to go if they need to, but I'm willing to stay on for a few minutes if anybody has any additional questions.
don't want to hold you up.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I did have one extra question. If we have relevant positions from, say, like our undergrad days of like interning and volunteering, but have only had non-relevant positions since, how far back is it really worth adding them in if it's like 6 years or, you know, it's not super near, you know what I mean?
You mean close in time?
Close in time, yes.
But how relevant? Okay, but how relevant would it be then?
I mean, it would provide a foundational background experience within the environment.
But is that something that you can otherwise show what you've done while you've been an undergrad?
Possibly. I don't know. I feel like it's just like communicating that there's a lot more hands-on experience than just undergrad. It's almost like highlighting parts of it is how it works in my brain.
Okay.
But is it just outdated?
Well, okay, hard to tell in the abstract. I'm happy to, I think any of us would be happy to take a look at your, what you think you might want to do and help you position the information accordingly. Again, it really depends on what you're applying for.
Yeah, okay.
So